Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Nice to see you all here. My name is Bryan Glick. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Computer Weekly. I also run Tech Target's editorial operations outside of the Americas, so across EMEA and our APAC editorial operation as well. I'm here now to give you, help to give you a few insights into what your ultimate target audience, your customers are doing at the moment. I'll introduce our panel to you in a moment, but this is an opportunity for you to hear from a couple of real-life IT buyers, senior IT leaders, talking about their life, their jobs, how they go about making the decisions that ultimately lead to a purchase from organisations like yourselves. It's an opportunity for them also to tell you a little bit about what they think about you and the way that you market to them and how they receive that. So hopefully I think it's something that both sides will probably get something out of over the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. I've got a couple of quick slides that I'm going to go through. Then basically I'm going to run through a series of questions with our speakers, and at the end we'll open it up to give you an opportunity to put some questions to them as well. So please do try and think of some questions as we're going through. It's a really great opportunity for you to be able to talk to a couple of real life senior IT buyers about how their thought processes work. Firstly, just to feed back to you some more Tech Target research. We do one of the big research projects we do every year is a media consumption analysis, looking at how our audience, our Computer Weekly audience, our Tech Target audience around the world are buying, what the key tasks they do, what's changing in that, how the processes they use to buy from are changing. What you can see here is some of the questions from that, where we were asking about how the buying journey has changed and become more collaborative. The key figure probably is probably the middle one that you're looking at there, under the heading works collaboratively with others on the buying team. And really what that's trying to get across is the fact that at pretty much every stage of a buying process these days in organisations, it's a team effort. People like our panel here are leading that team effort, and ultimately they may be the ones who sign the check. But increasingly now it is very much a collaborative process involving people from across their organisation, both from the IT organisation and the business organisation as well, and of course potentially trusted advisors who are part of that. So this, clearly is something that's been a big trend, I'm sure you're all aware of, over a number of years, is that IT buying decisions are being made much more broadly across all of the organisation. And from your perspective, it really stresses the importance of targeting not just the senior CIO, but the people within the organisation. And I'm sure both of our speakers here will reinforce that when we get a chance to talk to them in a minute. This other little bit of research, we asked our audience of IT buyers, where do they go to find out information? You will all be very pleased, I'm sure, to hear that their number one was tech vendor websites, so well done, you're doing something right. I'm very pleased to say that the second on that list was technology websites like Computer Weekly. I'm told that CIOs do also read some other websites, but I don't quite understand that, really, to be honest. But the digital sources are very much the first point of call for IT buyers these days. Whether it's your websites, whether it's independent sources like ours, you can see generally across the board. First question, when I've identified a problem, begin to explore my options. More than 80% of IT buyers come to either your websites or our websites. So just really reinforcing the importance of the relationships that you have digitally and that we have digitally with this audience. Having looked very broadly at what the audience is doing, let's look more specifically at what a couple of people within that audience are doing. Really pleased to introduce a really good panel for you today. First to my left is Avril Chester. Avril was until recently IT director at the charity Scope. She left Scope a few months ago, and she's now setting up her own not-for-profit startup, and she'll tell you a little bit about that at the moment. Alongside Avril is Mike McCormick. Mike is CIO of Viva Energy Group, which is energy distribution, oil and gas distribution company operating almost exclusively in Africa. So we have two very different organisations from not-for-profit at one end to big oil at the other end. But I think what you'll find interestingly is the commonality between how things work for the both of them too. So to give you both a chance to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about yourselves, and perhaps tell us what are the big issues for you at the moment? What are your priorities at the moment over the next 12 months that you're working on? Avril.
Hello, everybody. It's great to meet you, and you're doing brilliantly staying inside when it's gorgeous out there. Not that you wanted to know that.
Don't tell them that.
Don't tell them. Thank you, Brian, for the introduction. In January, I kind of jumped off that huge cliff and decided to work on my own tech startup. So I'm not quite sure what part of mad and frightening I'm at the moment, but it is really, really, really brilliant. And my new startup's called Cancer Central, and the idea being it's going to be a one centralised place for all cancer information. So that's from the private, public and not-for-profit sector. So you can actually see what's around you and see what you need at the times when you can't find it the most, because it's extremely difficult to know what's out there. And there are so many businesses, societies and communities delivering incredible stuff, and you just don't connect with them because you don't know they're there. So it's about making it an easy journey for those who are going through it, their friends and family, but also connecting to the people that need them. So to start off, I had a hackathon yesterday, and Brian was a judge, and it was an absolutely amazing day. I've got so many ideas to take forward to launch. And if I may, very quickly, I've also launched my crowdfunding campaign. I promise it's just a small pitch. Really need money. So basically, if you go to my website, cancercentral.org.uk, it's not .com.co.uk, it's .org.uk, you'll find the details there. It's also an Indiegogo, and it's everything from £20 to dedicate to a loved one and have their name on the site, all the way through to corporate sponsorship. Anybody? I am ready to chat. So in terms of my challenges, apart from funding and my new venture over the next 12 months, if I was to put my hat back on when I worked as IT director for Scope, the thing is, from a charity and not-for-profit sector, they are naturally a bit behind the private sector. I've privileged to work with a lot of different sectors. I've worked as interim sort of IT director, and charity obviously are naturally behind because it is the funding, because it is the need to go, oof, we need to invest in technology, when obviously you want everything to go to the front line. But it comes to a point where actually you do need to invest because it's costing more money to do your plasters and your sticky back plastic and your staples. So one of the big things that Scope's sort of going through is a massive change in terms of the organisation, what it's about. It has a head office change. It is actually going through a separation of its services, which are part of sort of the government regulated stuff. So that's a really, really big change for the organisation. They're going to change more to a digital transformation landscape. So there's a whole host of things in there. And obviously it was a real privilege to be there to look at the foundations and what we needed to do. And it was everything from connectivity all the way through to the devices we use. And if you think about it, charity has retail. Charity has head office, charity has satellite sites. So we have a whole plethora of things that we need to understand, both from stock to, doing your basic CRM and your ERP and everything else. So it's quite an interesting challenge and a great landscape.
Right, tough act to follow. I won't be anywhere near as funny
Crowdfunding.
or as inspirational as that, so apologies in advance. I will say very early on, I tend to speak enormously quickly. But I don't realise that I'm doing it. So if anyone can't keep up, please just put your hand up and I'll try and remember to speak a bit more slowly. Viva Energy is an organisation that was created by downselling shares in Shell. Viva Energy owns all the Shell service stations in Africa other than South Africa. We currently have 1,800 plus outlets, and we also have a fairly significant mining, commercial, aviation and marine business as well, where we sell just wet stock, so fuels and lubricants, and a fairly significant convenience retailing, where we often are the centre or the hub for shopping for communities in African countries. Today we are operational in 16 countries, and if everything goes well, by the 1st of July we'll be in 24 countries in Africa. We've been in business for just over 6 years. And you probably won't have heard of us because we don't promote the Vivo brand. We obviously push the Shell brand. But I would encourage you all to take 30 seconds now to look us up on the internet, because there are activities taking place around Viva at the moment that I'm not at liberty to discuss, but in the media. And I recommend you maybe do that right now because it might help you with the questions that you might want to ask me. So, there we go.
Do you want to tell us a little about what your sort of main technology priorities are at the moment?
So technology projects, because of the stuff that you're probably all Googling right now, security is a major concern for us going forward. As for, I think for all IT people, it's always an issue, but our attack surface is about to become significantly larger, and our visibility is probably about to become significantly larger as well. So we'll become a target in ways that we've never been before, and obviously I'm a little bit paranoid about that. We are halfway through a greenfield, absolute grounds up SAP or S4HANA deployment, and as I've already discussed, we're in the process of taking on another 9 new countries, which is another 300 service stations. So that's all happening, in fact, all coalescing in the next 3 months. So it's a fairly quiet time for us right now. So.
Cool, thank you both. So let's go to the start of the projects. You've both talked about some of the projects that you've had going on. Once you've identified a requirement, a business requirement that you're going to need some technology for, what's step one? Where do you start, and what's the process that you go through to get from that requirement towards to reaching a decision? And is that changing? And how is that process changing as the market changes as well? Avril?
The process is changing. So if we just look at the simple commodity buying, I just need a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, whatever it is. Typically in the past, obviously charities go, oh, I know, I'll get the cheapest deal for that one tablet. Oh, I know, I'll get cheapest deal for that 2 laptops. And you end up with an absolute headache because the cost of managing all those different images, all those different devices that invariably lovely break on you, and a very small tech team to support is very difficult. So it is about working with partners on that consolidation. Let's look about having a partnership in looking at something that is standard that we can have across the organisation. How about you do the imaging for us? We haven't got time in terms of the small team that's typically in charities. So, what are the extra value adds that is part of that process that you could possibly do? And even if we look at the bigger projects and the big RFP that I run for connectivity, telephony, and part of that end user computing, I brought it into the same partnership. I really wanted to go in partnership for 3 years with an organisation for us to change the way we were connecting and to change the way we had our networks. And security is a really, really good point, piece of that. So at the start of the RFP process, we went around all our sort of like business partners and said, okay, what is it that you really are frustrated at? But what is your strategy? So we can understand where they're going, particularly retail. They wanted to expand. So what is it they can't do currently in shops, which is preventing them because they've got a tiny little broadband dial-up, which is really painful. They need to put in new tills or things like that. So we were gathering those requirements. Part of my team, obviously, in terms of tech to BA to sort of people in the business, and then we went out to a number of suppliers that I hadn't met and partners that I had met, just to engage in that initial discussion.
Mike, same question.
Yeah, I would agree that I think things are changing. I don't think the buying process is linear anymore. Identify the need, find a product, and roll it out. It really has to form part of an ecosystem, and it's ever changing. The speed of technology is going so quickly. Is how do you accelerate a decision process so you can be at leading edge, but then identify something that's going to last you for a period of time, and you end up chasing your tail a little bit sometimes about how do these things come together. And I've noticed specifically in the last 24 months just the deluge of products on the marketplace that was massive overlap, and the nature of our organisation makes us very, very lean. So I want the smallest number of applications as possible but the maximum functionality. So how do I find the collaboration? And in the past it's always been, well, what is the best product in that space? And I will buy that product and invest in that for a period of time. And now it's about how you bring that together, I find. And it adds time to the decision-making process, because are you too early or are you too late, and when to buy something?
I would guess as well. I mean, you alluded to this earlier, Mike. With the technology speeding up the speed of business, those buying cycles have probably become a lot shorter these days as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the fortunate position of having a lot of autonomy in my buying process. My board doesn't get very involved in that. As I'm sure you appreciate, they got involved in the SAP decision, but other than that, everything below the line, it's an annual budget cycle, and I can spend how I want without going over budget. So I can make decisions very quickly. I don't have a long, drawn-out process. But you're trying to do a day job. You're trying to build a roadmap. You're trying to solve today's problems. You're also trying to solve next year's problems. So when do you spend the money? Do you wait a little bit longer so you're not the first guy on it? Or do you take the punt, have the distinction of being the first one there and taking the pain, but being ahead of the curve? So those are the research stuff is a factor in that, because how do I make that decision? Am I a leader or a follower?
Yeah. Perfect link into the next question. Really, you both described how the process is changing, how the pressures are increasing, the buying cycle is coming down. So what's the key information that you need to help you to make those buying decisions, and where do you go to find it? And this is the question where you say Computer Weekly, in case you weren't sure.
Yeah, I just need the right answer first time. Right, it's as simple as that. So I need one supplier to come in, they're the best on the market, and they'll give it to me for free.
Yeah, but yeah, so
Oh no, that's my line.
but carry on.
So that's a really difficult question. It's an easy question, it's a difficult answer. It goes back to your slide, to be honest with you. It's not a single source. It is about using whatever resources are available to you. I think you need to start with what is the problem. And so is it a problem because something broke? Is it a problem because the business is changing? Is it a problem because you're now made aware of a technology that solves a problem that you were never aware of? And those are the gotchas. Those are the ones, especially in the security space, where you realise that you think you're okay, you do some tests, life's good, and then you look at a new product, or there's a new article that talks about a new attack vector, and you suddenly realise that you've got gaping holes. And now is that suddenly a crisis? Because you now know about it, and you've got to do something about it today, or actually, I've lived with it for 24 months. Is it really a problem at all? So then it's about trying to hone down to someone who specialises in that space, and then understanding how you're going to fit that into your roadmap, and are you going to have to reprioritise budgets because this thing has now become more of an issue. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is what is the problem, and how do you actually identify it? What's the source of the problem? So is it a reaction, or is it a plan?
And I absolutely agree with you. And I think I want to be slightly controversial, and we were talking about this outside. I don't care about Gartner or Forresters. I really don't. I genuinely think them, excuse my language, they're a certain ilk of people who are just raising loads of funds so they can have a lifestyle. It doesn't appeal to me, and a lot of the information's old whenever I have looked at it, and which has been very, very infrequent. So for me, I'm seeing a new trend, and this is something you really need to be aware of. So we do look at articles and go onto websites and things, but actually what I look for in those articles is something that Bryan publishes, which actually compares stuff and tells me real information. I'm not looking for a sales glossy from you. I am looking for a case study. I go to my network events, I go to a lot of them, I find them of huge value. So when a number of CIOs sit around the table, sort of 20 of us, when we discuss we've got a problem, they talk about who their partners are. I want to know what the issues have been, how they've resolved it, because tech's tech, application fails, things happen, it's okay, but it's a way we deal with it together. So for when I go through my buying process, it's very much about reading other people's LinkedIn posts that talks about their case study with you. It's about going onto the website and seeing what Bryan says and the latest trends. I want to know what real people think. I don't want to know what some random glossy paper tells me.
Cool, thank you. The other slide that I put up earlier on, highlighted in a broad sense again how the teams that are involved in making buying decisions are expanding throughout the organisation. From the way that the both of you have worked, tell us a little bit about the team that's involved in the buying process. Who's involved. How broadly across the organisation are those decisions made?
Well, if I'm going to use my example again at Scope, purely because it was such a big one and it involved so many people, to the stage when we had all the RFP process back and obviously we'd done the evaluation. In the presentations with the final sort of potential partners, I had people there that I felt was really important in terms of the receipts of this particular partnership. So the MD of retail was there. It was a technical presentation. He did brilliantly. A whole day of sort of staring, and he came out actually learning loads. But I really wanted to know from him, they've got to go into every single retail shop and sort everything out. Do you feel they have the right values? Do you feel they have the right approach to work with your volunteers, work with your assistants, work with your managers that are there? Will they fit our organisation? Same thing, it was very much about getting, obviously, the finance directors involved, but in particularly, those on sort of the customer side of things. I wanted to have them involved. So we put them in front of the really, really important stakeholders from across the business, so we can see how much you can partnership with us. It's not just about partnering with technology, we're just obviously here to enable this thing to happen.
I'd like to echo a lot of that. But I would differentiate in two different pieces. I think there's the IT for IT component, and where we're keeping the organisation safe, where there's minimal user direct impact, then that's a decision that we'll take internally. And I have a brutally lean team. I have one server guy, I have one architect, and one network guy, and we manage 4,000 endpoints. So it's very easy for me to get that community together to have decisions. So they'll identify stuff, they'll throw it to me, I'll do the same. In fact, due to the relationship with Bryan's organisation, a lot of people like yourselves are coming to me directly, and I'm filtering that so that my guys can do the tech and I can decide who we want to take opportunities further forward with. Based on mistakes that we've made as an organisation in the past, and this is to your point, is where they are customer facing or internal customers, external customers, we are now engaging far more directly with those people and the consumers of the technology. And getting them in very early because they understand their requirements far better than we do. And I think we've been quite arrogant as IT in the past to tell you how to do your job. What we're turning that around now is we'll tell us what you want, we'll help you make better decisions, we'll guide you on what's an economic choice, we'll help you with the business case, and we'll factor in the total cost of ownership over time, help you with those decisions.
Okay, thank you. So you've talked about the process you go through, you've talked about the information you need, the people that are involved in your organisations. Key question, I guess, for a lot of the people here is what do you really want from a supplier during that process? When do you want engagement from suppliers? What do you want? What's the sort of information you want from a supplier? How do you want, in your ideal situation, should that process work and that engagement work from your side?
Well, they need ESP, it's as simple as that. So don't call me when I don't want you to, but be there just when I need you. It's a tough one, and it's the organisations that have done well with Vivo are those that have done their research and understood who we are. So rather than doing it as a cold call, understand what we're about a little bit, and have done enough research to understand that Viva Energy isn't Shell, and we don't have the wallet that Shell has, and we don't behave in the same way. Whilst we use their brand, we operate fundamentally differently. So if you come to me and you understand that from the beginning, we're going to get off on a good foot to begin with. And then understand that this is, if we're going to buy something from you, this is probably going to be a relationship and not a sale. And as I say, the organisation's done well for us, have taken that leap of faith, they've looked at Vivo's history, realised that it's an organisation that has started from very humble beginnings, but has very strong aspirations and is doing very well. And I'm still working with people that I met on the first day, and they're still running, and as our business has grown, their profitability has grown as well because we've been able to share that. Those people who have swooped in, tried to do the quick sale, are invariably gone. So it's that initial research that when you contact me, understand who I am, and I don't mean me as a person, I mean me as a company, so that we can have common understanding, and then realise that I know what I want and I know what I don't want, so I'm not going to buy something because you tell me to. What you are going to do well at, and then build that relationship from, is give me enough information to make my decisions more informed and to show the differentiators and how it can be unique to me.
Cool. Avril?
That's brilliant. No, I don't envy you guys at all. I mean, it is really, really, really tough because exactly as you said, Mike, you know, it's please stop contacting me. I've got emails flying around all over the place, and you know those cold LinkedIn emails that say, "Hi, I think I've got something of interest to you." How do you know what's of interest to me? I rarely answer them, and I don't mean that rudely. I know it's a person the other end, and you're working really hard, and you have a goal to hit, and you're trying to reach out and get a new contact. I totally get that, but we're really snowed. So it is very much about that understanding us, which takes a bit of homework. You know, if you LinkedIn and say, you know what, I've seen you were thinking about sort of doing this, or your article talks about this, or I met you at the event, great, we start that connection. Connection leads to relationship, relationships lead to the sale. And it's very much about that relationship. You know, I met somebody right at the beginning of Scope. You know, things changed when I sort of started, and I went, you know, I'm really sorry, we're not looking for that right now. 6 months down the line, I contacted them and said, you know what, you know, we had that conversation way back, and of course we had the odd email in between. It's time to have a chat now. So it might take a long time, which is not great for your sales pipeline, but unfortunately these things need to be nurtured.
Okay. That's you sort of described your ideal world there in many ways. In your real life day-to-day experience, what do you find typically suppliers do well in the way they market to you? What do you find that they do badly? And if you've got any examples to illustrate that, would be useful. You don't necessarily have to name the supplier, of course, unless you choose to.
So I've got a couple of cues. So we are an organisation that exists as a consequence of Shell. So when we became Viva Energy, we inherited a lot of their technologies. I'm running an ERP at the moment that's been in place for in excess of 19 years. So a great long-term relationship. And without naming the supplier, who has a lot of red in their logo, I cannot imagine they've done anything else than actively gone out to destroy the relationship, because the things that they did and the way they managed it couldn't have happened by accident over and over and over and over again. Another supplier, the SAP implementation, much to my surprise, actually did exactly what I've just described in terms of understanding the business, taking the leap of faith, and being patient with us. Doing their homework, doing their research, and coming to me with real answers, not just the sales pitch. And you know, they've won a very big piece of business. We're not even finished deploying it. We're talking about buying more stuff, and Vivo continues to grow. And as we add this new organisation, you know, that's instant free money for them, because they're going to come to our environment. So it's patience, it's research, and it's been one-on-one, and understanding that. In terms of the smaller scale stuff, it's getting the cues from, I'm interested, and I'll call you in 6 weeks, or put an invite, come back to me in a month, and then doing that and following up on it, but not sending me something the next day saying, oh, and by there's this other thing. Oh, and by the way, there's an event. And by the way, there's a cocktail event, and I just don't have time. I'd be drunk all day, every day if I went to a supplier meeting. That would be a wonderful life, I'm sure, but probably wouldn't pay very well. So it's that kind of stuff. So it's knowing when to back off, and I get then the people who make the effort, do the research. I'm talking to many of those people today, and I've talked about security. There's a trigger event. I'm bringing on a security expert. I'm not going to make any final buying decisions till that guy comes on board, because you know, he's got to live with the stuff that I'm going to do to him, so I want him to be involved in it. So I've got a whole bunch of people stacked up waiting to go back, and a whole bunch of people I'm not going to talk to again, because they just keep on coming back every week saying, I know we'd speak again in a month, but has anything changed? Well, the answer is no, and thanks, but see you later.
You're absolutely right. I think some of the priceless ones are when you get an email through, hi, you know, da 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 da. And you think, well, I'll get back to that. I just need to sort this out. Literally 24 hours later, hi, have you not had a chance to read my email? No, I haven't. I will, you know, I do generally answer, but if you're going to keep going like this, I'm not going to. So it is that kind of sort of pace thing. And the ones that really work is a case of, you know what, I'm sorry, I've got no headspace for this 2 minutes, but can you call me in a month? And those that do, I go, yes, now let's have a talk about that. So that's a really, really good piece in terms of, you know, keeping track of that, obviously through your CRM and everything else. There was a fantastic piece about the discussion earlier that I caught from the panel right at the end that actually talked about the honesty. Look, this is where our product really rates. in comparison to competitors, and be honest with, these are the strengths, and this is where it can help you for the organization in comparison to these. I really like that. So, pointing me to sort of articles or things that, you've written or Brian's written for you, that I'm sure there's no backhanded, but you know what I mean. Those types of things I find really informative, and that gets me much more interested in you because you're honest. We want an open and honest relationship. Things aren't perfect. So what is it? What are your strengths? Everyone has strengths. What is this application strength? How do we shrink this application stack that's an absolute headache on the legacy front in all of our companies? Where can it help us with that? And how does that measure up in comparison to other things? And again, case studies are so important.
Cool. I've got a couple more quick questions, and then I'll come to you guys to ask some questions. So please have some questions ready to go. We talked about sort of, I suppose to a certain extent, tactical stuff, buying decisions, what information you need from people like this for your buying decisions. At a more strategic level, when you're thinking longer term, more strategically about what your needs are, to what extent, if at all, do you turn to marketing information from vendors and their longer term roadmaps and that sort of thing? What role do these guys play in your longer term strategic thinking?
Shall I break the bad news? Unless you've got something that's super groundbreaking, that really, really is absolutely out of this world that we've never heard of or seen before, when I look at sort of strategies and sort of pull that together, I do look around at what industry is doing, and the most importantly, I have a chat with networks. Networks are the most important thing because they got snippets of bits and pieces of what's actually going on. And unless it's an existing partnership where we're going, okay, so for example, once we deliver all the connectivity network and everything else at scope, right, how do we now take this forward? Where should we now go? That's when we'll discuss the strategy together, because you're already in the partnership, you're already delivering the service. I don't tend to go out to marketing material to help influence my strategy unless it's an absolute groundbreaking wow product, and I'm sorry, I'd rather be honest.
Okay. Right.
I think I feel slightly differently. We tend to be bleeding edge with our technology. We're not afraid of risk. Risk's only a problem if you don't manage it. So new technology, new software, new hardware is inherent with risk. Who wants to be the first one? Well, I'm happy to be that guy. But it comes back to Avril's point earlier, is be honest about where you are right now. And I want to understand your roadmap to see how it complements with my roadmap. And am I now going to change my roadmap as a consequence of what you're doing? So again, it comes back to relationships. It comes back to being factual. And almost going back to an earlier question, is how do you catch my eye in the first place? And it is a mixture of sources, and it is the ones that you listed. It is through articles like yours. It's through the media, but equally it's through contacts as well. So if you figure out the ownership structure of my organisation, there's a lot of other cousins and brothers and sisters in our organisation, and we share information. And you're not going to get a cross sale if you don't serve me, or vice versa, because we share that stuff. And then there's the broader community outside of it. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Last question for me before I open it out. You've given a lot of a lot of advice here to the audience around how you like to be engaged with and so forth. By way of summary, if you could give one piece of advice to this audience about how they should best engage with you and your IT leadership peers generally, what would that be?
Don't see me as a sucker, and don't see me as a victim. See me as a relationship.
Nice. Avril?
Yeah, it's about drawing our attention to where you've been in the news, who you currently work with. Same thing. You made a really good point earlier about who's in the sector. Tell me who else. What other charities? What are not-for-profit? Where you can bring stuff in the private sector across that would be of benefit. Draw those obvious correlations, and that'd be great. So
very much around the real life, the case study type stuff. Yeah. Great, cool. Hopefully, you've taken a few things away from there. Some great insights there, I think, into how these guys work. Certainly, say my experience to layer on top of that is that what you've heard from Mike and Avril is very typical from all organisations you talk to, large to small, private sector, public sector, not for profit. Hope you've been able to take away some interesting insights there. So a big thank you to Avril Chester and Mike McCormick for your time and contribution.
Thank you.